Hey, Dennis Mathewson here, coming to you from a wet and wild, windy, rainy day here in Honolulu. What a great day to talk about water. Well, you know what? I've been in Honolulu now for over 4 decades, and I think the first thing I did when I came here was get wet. You know, I came from the desert, so the desert didn't have a whole lot of beaches in it. We had a lot of sand, but they're not the same. I got into doing some surfing, some snorkeling, some swimming, and I think the big excitement was when I got into scuba diving. That was what was cool. So when I got underwater, I just found the magic that was so inspiring to see. I hooked up with some friends early in Hawaii in the early 80s, and Tom and Nemo and Steve and Gary Simons, and they had a charter service over in Kona. As friends, we would go over there and go scuba diving, and the closer I got to all these guys and the hours we'd spend underwater, once I was certified to scuba dive, man, hundreds of hours later, I had seen so much, and all types of sea life and animals, everything from dolphins to whales to sharks to octopus to turtles to eels and the incredible colorful fish galore. We went from surface dives on reefs to way deep. The ones that were down there were huge, but the experience of it is so much to take in. One day I was swimming with these jellyfish, large pink jellyfish, and the surge was pretty mean, and the surge is kind of like wind. And so, I was kind of hanging onto this reef, and this big pink jellyfish was next to me, and I thought, these things can steer themselves or what? So he was swimming against the current, and so I tried to push him in a direction to see if he could steer himself back, and he turned himself back around and swam into it. As I watched my scuba tank bubbles blow by him, I thought, well, there's a painting right there, man. What a piece of inspiration. So that's kind of where all this happened. I had so much inspiration to work with. It's just, endless. So let's talk about how I want my paintings done. Well, now that you know how I'm inspired to do it, once you find out how I actually do them, you'll find it interesting. So I'm going to start off with a piece of marine grade aluminum. Once I get that piece, I select it, and I'll sand the edges and clean it. And I got to have the edges polished off round. They can't be flat and square, just part of my technique. Then once that's all done, then I'm going to go ahead with a wide wheel. I'm going to use this abrasive wheel, and with hundreds of strokes back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth until I get a really good transition of a pattern going. Once I kind of have that going, then I'll ride up on the wheel. I kind of get it up on its edge. Gives me a little bit more detail and cuts a little deeper, and I can kind of do more design work with it this way, and that's when I start to get my water movements in. Another 100 strokes later, you can start to feel the water finding in it. Then I'll feather out the sides, maybe a couple more details here and there. Then I'm going to change my wheel. I'm going to go with a smaller wheel. The smaller wheel allows me to get more detail. So now I'm going to add some reef into it. I don't draw on the surface. I never put any pencil lines or anything on there. That's not my technique. I use my imagination. I kind of just randomly come up with a good flowing pattern that works with the background. So the chemicals and all the things that I work with on these projects, I'm very experienced with everything from marine to aircraft, to automotive, to motorcycles. I've done it all. But the stuff I work with is not cheap. And so it's got to be done right the first time. Once I apply on these chemicals and the wiping and the cleaning, and I put down an adhesive coat and a sealer coat, then I'll start to move color through the spray guns. The spray guns, I set them up with, I take maybe 3 shades of blue and I break them into 12 shades. In other words, I counter mix each one as it goes. I just don't go light blue to dark blue with 2 different coats. I don't want any blotching. I want a smooth transition where you can't even see the color of the blue, how it fades. So I use little bits of each color as I go, and back and forth with the spray gun until I get that exact blend. Once that blend is all done and the blues are perfect as I want them, light to dark, then I put a top coat of clear on that and allow that to dry a couple days. Then I'm going to sand it, prep it, lay some mask on it, add my drawing that I probably did on paper or something like that, cut out those areas and do some random airbrush work, puts on some groundwork. The groundwork and colors I work with, again, nothing's right out of the can. I don't like using red, yellow, blue right out of the can. I mix all my own tones and values, a lot of opaque, translucent, and transparent colors. I blend everything. So the values and the tones I get can be warm or cool, wherever I need to get to, that's how I get there. Once I'm blending all those tones in, I'll remove all the mask. I don't detail everything while it's masked. I kind of just leave it kind of loose. Then once all the mask is removed, then I'm going to go ahead and detail everything freehand. So it's nice and soft and has a nice transition. I use airbrush, I use brush, I use brush, airbrush, brush, brush, airbrush, airbrush, brush, airbrush. I don't have any set system. I just get what look I want as I need to get there. So I move back and forth until I get that right desired. I'm always imagining and always creating. So a lot of these animals I may use a reference, but I'm always kind of changing values in it, kind of imagining and using my own creativity even off my own references. A lot of times I'll paint jellyfish without even looking at a photo, or a turtle without even looking at one. I've just spent so many hours with them underwater. I know what they look like. I know I could see it in my head. Same with the whale's eye, part of a memory I'll never forget. So it shows up in the art. Once that artwork's all done, I'll kind of just select some areas. And I think back to that day with the jellyfish and the way the bubbles were moving across it from my scuba tank. And I had the flow of the bubbles going with the animal. The tentacles of the jellyfish are going to flow this way, so the bubbles have to flow that same way, even though the movement of the background will stay its own direction. That's how water worked. I remember being there. So I just kind of used that whole balance and that memory that I saw in the painting. Once the bubbles are all done, and I'm happy to use a few of my own Dennis Mathewson bubble stencils. Once they're detailed out, I add little highlights in them. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then a signature, the piece is done. Next I'm going to go to a top coat and a clear coat. Then after that I photograph it. It might go into print. You might see these images available in limited editions. You go to DennisMathewsonArt.com and you'll see a lot of my images available in print. The originals are in my galleries over the years. I've done over 300 jellyfish originals in my career, and probably turtles are close to over 100. And other marine art. But what was really cool about it in the art gallery business when I got into it is I didn't walk in painting jellyfishes. I started off doing the tiki stuff. You know, I grew up around Hawaii with its marine art, seeing it, other artists painting it. You know, in the early 80s you saw it everywhere, you know, dolphins, whales, dolphins and whales and turtles. Well, I didn't want to do that when I got in the gallery business. I wanted to do my own, find my own niche. So I started off with some jellyfish. And they thought, oh, these will never work. And boy, they sure worked, you know, 300 of them later. And, you know, part of my signature style. Turtles. Then I got into sea dragons. I got into other marine art that, you know, other artists weren't painting. I wanted to have that identity. Eventually, I got into whales and dolphins, and I could always paint those all along the way. But once I kind of found my niche with it, that's where it went. Always riding with my bubbles, always on the metal, kind of found their own way. So thank you for enjoying my art all these years, and as you see it now, knowing a little bit more about it, and just what went through that in my imagination and how I got there with it, and it'll give you a little bit more meaning to the piece you may own. If you don't own it now, maybe you'll own one in the future. Again, visit us at DennisMathewsonArt.com, and you'll see all kinds of creativity from Hawaii. Aloha.